All right, today we're diving into something, well, something I bet you didn't see coming. It's this incredibly deep academic critique of modern atheism, but it's where it comes from and how it does it that makes it so fascinating. So let's explore what happens when an ancient theological tradition really, and I mean really, examines contemporary secular thought.
So get this, the source for this whole explainer, it's a PhD dissertation. But hold on, this isn't your typical Islamic argument against atheism. No, it does something way more interesting. It systematically breaks down how Western scholars themselves have tried to tackle atheism, and that creates a totally different kind of conversation.
And here it is. This is the actual document we're talking about. What you're looking at is a doctoral thesis from the Islamic University in Medina. And you got to understand, this isn't just any university. We're talking about one of the most important hubs for Sunni Islamic learning on the planet. So this is a major work coming from the very heart of that tradition. And the scale of this thing, it's just massive. 766 pages. This isn't a blog post or a quick essay, right? This is an exhaustive, super detailed academic study. That sheer volume alone tells you we're dealing with some seriously meticulous scholarship here. Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. If the point isn't just to slam the door and say atheism is wrong, then what is the game plan here? Well, the answer is all in its unique and very deliberate method. To really get what this dissertation is doing, we have to start right where the author starts, and that means we need to get our definitions straight. The whole analysis really depends on understanding the specific Arabic term for atheism, which is ilhad.
Linguistically, the root of ilhad is pretty broad. It just means to lean away, to deviate, to turn from something. Think of it like a river carving a new path, or someone wandering off the main trail. It's this general idea of straying.
But when you bring it into an Islamic context, that meaning gets laser-focused. It's not just any deviation, it's specifically a deviation away from what is seen as truth and towards what is seen as falsehood. So that direction is absolutely key.
And that all leads us right here to the working definition the dissertation uses, pulling from the hugely influential scholar Ibn Taymiyyah. For the next 700-plus pages, ilhad means one very specific thing, the complete and total denial of a creator. Nailing down this precise definition is the foundation for everything that follows.
Okay, so now let's get into the how. What's the core strategy here? This isn't about just building a wall between Islamic and Western thought. It's more like building a bridge, but for the purpose of a really deep critical analysis.
And this is the absolute genius of the approach. Instead of just building an Islamic case from the ground up, the author digs right into the arguments that Western theists, we're talking mostly Christians here, have already come up with to argue against atheism. He rolls up his sleeves and uses their work as the raw material for his own analysis.
So where does this idea even come from? Well, it's rooted in this quote, again from Ibn Taymiyyah. The basic idea is that if you study the back and forth between different groups, the weak spots in all their arguments start to show up. And that process is what pushes someone who's genuinely looking for answers toward a stronger truth. It's almost like using their debates to triangulate a clearer position.
And this right here, this breaks down that whole method into 4 clear steps. It's the playbook he uses for every single topic. First, he presents the Western arguments in detail. Then, he looks for the benefit. What's actually strong or useful in there? After that comes the critique, where he examines the weaknesses from a specifically Islamic point of view. And finally, he puts it all together. He synthesizes it to build what he argues is a much stronger, more solid refutation. So that's the method, but what does it actually look like in practice stretched across, 766 pages? Let's take a quick flyover tour of the dissertation to see just how deep this thing goes. The whole thing is neatly laid out. You've got a preface and then 3 huge chapters, and each one tackles a completely different angle of the whole atheism debate. Let's take a peek inside. Chapter 1 goes right for the philosophical foundations of atheism. It looks at Western responses to big ideas like materialism, the belief that only physical stuff is real, or scientism, the idea that science is the only way to know anything. After laying out the Western arguments, the author might critique them. For example, he might say that a Western counterargument, while useful, accidentally creates an idea about the soul and body that clashes with the core Islamic concept of God's absolute oneness, also known as Tawheed. Then, in Chapter 2, the script totally flips. We move from defense to offense. Here, the dissertation examines all those classic Western arguments for God's existence, like the cosmological argument.
the idea that the universe had to have a first cause. He'd first present how Western thinkers lay this out, and he'd point out its logical strengths. But then the critique might come in and say, hey, the logic you're using is strong, but it doesn't actually lead to the idea of a trinity. It points to a creator who is one, single, and indivisible.
And finally, Chapter 3 tackles the big objections to the theism head-on. It analyzes how Western scholars respond to common atheist arguments, especially that really tough emotional one, the problem of evil. You know, if God is all good and all-powerful, why is there so much suffering? Here, the author might see the common Western responses focusing on free will as useful, but maybe incomplete. He might then weave that together with the core Islamic idea that suffering isn't just random, it's a test from God, a way to grow spiritually. And just like that, the whole problem gets reframed.
Okay, so we've just zipped through this massive piece of work. What's the bottom line here? Why should we care about a study like this today in the middle of all the noise about faith and reason?
You know, the most important thing to get is that this dissertation isn't really an attack piece. It's not a polemic. It is an act of deep, serious intellectual engagement. It's a major scholarly tradition, taking a long, hard look at another one and using its own tools to forge a new path.
And you don't even have to take my word for it. The preface of the dissertation says it loud and clear. The stated goal isn't to shut people down, it's to open up a conversation, to invite fair-minded reflection and sincere dialogue. The whole thing is framed as a mutual search for truth, even when the disagreements are profound.
Which kind of leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? In a world that seems to reward shouting past each other and making caricatures of opposing views, what can we take away from this kind of approach? This idea of deeply, critically engaging with views we don't agree with, instead of just dismissing them out of hand.